Everybody, we get started. How's everybody doing? Good. So I gave this talk or a similar one at DerbyCon. This is about managed service providers or MSPs. I used to work for one. And the vulnerabilities in the platforms and some of the techniques that they are procedures that we use. So I'm Damian Profancik. I'm an application security consultant at Spider Labs. My contact details are there, Twitter. So who here works for a managed service provider or uses one? Cool. So basically, I'm not talking about MSSPs, so not security providers, but just general IT service providers. Basically, it's an outsourced IT company where it's either proactive or reactive support, and they usually have some sort of platform where they drop agents on their machines and then manage that from a central machine. And that allows them to do this all remotely and very automated, and manage multiple clients simultaneously. So basically what led me to this research, like I said, I used to work for a managed service provider, and one day I was doing some integration solution with one of the platforms, and we had done an upgrade and something broke, and so I started digging into it, looking at the source code to try to figure out what broke. And looking at the source code, saw something very scary. Basically, they were grabbing the referrer string and throwing it into a SQL statement. And so basically, it was SQL injection, really obvious right there. So I started to look further, and it got scary. So the reason why I was concerned about this is not only, well, hey, I work for a managed service provider, but basically, if you want to go after a company, they may be a hardened company, but if they're outsourcing like their IT to another company, then if you attack that company and they're more weak, then you obviously can get in easier. So an example of that is like Lockheed Martin and the RSA breach that happened. A lot of people speculate that people broke into RSA to get tokens to be able to log into Lockheed Martin under the radar. So that's the weakest link, right? So some areas of risk that I identified as I was going through this and developing for this talk is definitely looking at the service platform and vulnerabilities in the platform and how can we attack that on all the computers that they're managing. But then also a lot of the more commonplace stuff that we use through social engineering and ticketing system, password management, and such. So the service platform, there are a handful of major players in the space, and it works as a client-server architecture. You have this server, typically internet-facing, and you have agents on all the machines of all the clients, and they check in, and you can do operations on them. Some of those operations are things like inventorying, remote control, scripting. You can do monitoring, backups, and several other different tasks, all remotely automated. Allows you to be a lot more efficient, and it's great. It works really well. So I started looking at this and looking at, like I said, this is the internet-facing server, and so I started looking at Shodan and some Google results to try to figure out, well, how many of these platforms are out there? What could be an attack surface for somebody? And if you look at this, 700 or so of the top one here, that doesn't sound like much, but when you think about behind that one server could be hundreds of thousands of computers that it manages. So, even if there's 100 behind each one, you hit all those on, let's say, level platforms, for example, and you have 70,000 of a botnet pretty fast. And then from public sources, from their websites, they boast, some of their clients here. You got FedEx, you've got the Air Force, so definitely some risk there. So as I started looking at these platforms, I started to see basically the OWASP top 10. Right there, I was able to upload files, I was able to SQL inject, command injection, cross-site scripting, directed traversal, you name it. So just to reiterate, the impact here is, if I own one of the machines, I own them all, and that's across multiple companies. And one thing else is, one of the companies that was on there continuum, they only provide this service as a SaaS service. A lot of these providers provide a SaaS service as well as resell their platform to managed service providers, and a lot of them also use their own software internally for ticketing and for customer service and that sort of thing. So there's impact there as well. And then I also noticed that the agents on a lot of these platforms are on the system. So if I get on them and I can own that agent, easy access right there. So I don't know if who here was at DEF CON 20 and saw Dave Kennedy's talk, but he kind of gave this same sort of talk about Microsoft Configuration Manager, SCCM, and basically where you own SCCM and you own all the machines, right? Because it's going to do your bidding and push it out to everybody. So this is kind of like that same concept, except for let's scale this across multiple companies. SCCM isn't internet-facing typically and is only one company. But if I can attack a server that's managing multiple companies and it's internet-facing, the risk there goes way higher. So without further ado, let's check out some demos. So the first one I want to look at is an upload vulnerability. Moment of truth, Rex. That's why I recorded these, because I knew I only had 15 minutes. So I wrote some Python scripts, proof of concepts. That's probably really small for you. But basically what I'm doing there is I'm going to specify a target and then specify a script that I want to upload or something I want to upload. Basically this is just going to upload an ASP command shell to the server. And as you saw before I ran the script, I got a 404, so this didn't exist on the server prior to this. So, execute command. Now I got a shell. And I'm in as the IIS, I'm in as the system account. I like PowerPoint. Okay. So SQL injection. So this is yeah. Little red light camera fun. Okay, so. All right. So in this one, I'm just going to first test to see if my account is there, and it's not. Couldn't log in. So, so I wrote a script that would basically add an admin account as the master user on the system. So we're going to add that demo, specify target, and I'm using internal IPs just because this was a proof of concept demo net, but in theory you would be putting in a public IP here. So specify username, specify password, delete password.
Which service was it?
I cannot say.
Source code?
I cannot release.
You're my friend.
So I was able to get in and I'm logged in as a master account. I'm just going to run another SQL injection to remove that account. And this second SQL injection also cleanses all the logs, so erases any presence that I was there. Another awesome thing about this attack is the way that their database schema was set up is that once I injected, I was able to successfully log in. I could do anything I wanted. But if a valid administrator logged in and tried to delete that account, they can't. You throw up an error saying this account doesn't exist. Or if they tried to disable it or change the password, it wouldn't work. You had to actually get in the database and remove it. It's a feature, right? It's APT. After. So, I got one. I get a second because I said APT. Do I get a third now? So I thought, okay, well, those are cool and all, but so let's put all this together. Just with those two vulnerabilities, what can I do? And so that's where it was checkmate. So these vulnerabilities have been disclosed to the vendor, they've been patched, so, but
And that's why you can't say.
but I can't say. You can probably say why I can't say. Leave that to your imagination. So again, specify IP, specify what I want to upload to all the remote agents. This is basically just a piece of Python code that I borrowed from Mr. Kennedy, and then you can compile it to an exe to run. And so this piece of Python code is guaranteed it's going to bypass all AV, they're not looking for it. So specify that shell, it's basically a reverse shell going to connect back to me, and then I listen on port 31337 because I'm elite, and all the agents check back into me. I only had 10 agents on here. You'll notice I get 11 connections because one of those is the server itself. It's connecting back to me, and I'm running all of that as system. So, and another, just like the other weird quirkiness bug about this one was that every 15 minutes, all the agents would reverse connect back to me. It would just keep happening over and over. Yeah, one time I left my laptop on, and I came back and I had 30,000 connections back to me. So, so I wrote another one that would remove that attack. A feature. So. Yeah, I agree. So this is just a diagram. Basically what happened there is I sent one payload to the server. It distributed all of the payloads out to all the companies and all the computers that I'm running on, and they all reverse connect back to me. So now to the exciting stuff, so we're talking boring stuff. So the other risk areas, of course, are social engineering. Some of the attacks that I found on the server were not pre-auth. Both of these were pre-auth, so I could attack without a valid account. But there were a lot of SQL injection, cross-site scripting, things like that that were post-authentication. So obviously any valid session, easiest, best way to do that is email the help desk and say, hey, I can't get into this link, or it's not coming up in my browser, can you check it? Well, the help desk is always going to be logged into this software. So you have a valid session token right there. And a lot of, some of the attacks I also found were like unvalidated redirection. I love those because if you get a phishing email, what's the first thing you're going to go look at? You're going to go look at the link and go, oh, okay, where's it coming? Going to go send me to? It's not a malicious site, it's my own server. Okay, that's fine. Well, the payload's at the end of that, you want the parameters. So other methods, phone calls, physical, there's other types of social engineering. The ticketing system, that's also a great resource for attackers because there's a whole lot of information in it. There could be credentials, could be network details, anything else you could use to further the social engineering attack as well. The password management system, this is also 3 minutes in. Also a great resource because a lot of companies are not doing this right. I've seen some companies that have just like a KeyPass database that pass around all their employees. What if an employee leaves and they walk with that database, right? You're going to go change all of your passwords off all of your, no, you're not. That's one where you got to be able to revoke access and log and figure out what do they have access to. And that leads to the next one, current, former employees. How do you restrict their access and revoke that? And then another one that's doesn't come to mind immediately, but there's real business implications here is contracts and SLAs. If you don't set like where the demarcation of responsibility is, the company's going to assume that anything that blinks and plugs into the wall, you have control over it. I can't count how many people we talk to too that assume that, oh, well, you're handling security too, right? You're a managed service provider. You're handling security. No, we're ops, so it's different. And then a breach disclosure policy, finding out, if they do get compromised, what's your responsibility for telling me that? So, what needs to be done? This talk was, the first time I wrote it for DerbyCon, I was really focused on managed service providers, but I decided, it really applies to both ends of the spectrum. Not only managed service providers, but also their customers. And, here's some things we need to do. We need to choose our tools wisely. That's hard, easy said, hard to do. But shameless plug here, TrustWave does stuff like that. And I specifically do stuff like that. And have a situational awareness, training your employees. And from a customer perspective, ask lots of questions. You need to know some of the stuff and what risk you're assuming and how they're protecting you. And then audit your providers. We also do that. So review your contracts, like I said. So that's basically it. Any questions? Supposedly I have a pass here for tonight if anyone has a good question. No, Jason.
Oh, come on. So what was your scope of context to go after the one service provider and go after all those other companies? Was that in your scope of work? Did all those other companies sign off on compromising all of them as well?
Well, I didn't do that. Right? This was pre-Spider Labs too, so this was really just work I was doing on my own, just looking at the platforms and just reverse engineering and figuring out how to work and where vulnerabilities and that sort of thing. So I didn't actually compromise any companies, but VMware is good for that. Any other questions? I assume Jason already got it. So there's some Spider Labs stuff here, and then again, here's my contact information. Somebody needs this. Who needs it?
I need it.
You need it? Okay, catch me after.
Drink up? Okay.